has been hit.
Hey, I didn't put my microphone on yet. I'm slacking right now.
Okay. Alright, right on. So, we left off chapter 3, verse 25, I think is where we left off. We're going to do 25 through 31 through that whole spiel. 25 through 31 through the end of the chapter if we can.
Of what book?
Oh,
For those who have
Romans.
not been here.
Oh, I got you. Romans chapter 3, verse 20, verse 25. We actually talked about 25 last time because it has the big $4 word in it. You know, propitiation. We talked about that. But to refresh your memory,
Did you find it, Don?
we talked about
Romans 3?
Romans
Yes,
3.
Got it.
You know, we're familiar with verse 23, which is for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Now, verse 25, whom God set forth as a propitiation by his blood through faith to demonstrate his righteousness, because of his forbearance, God had passed over the sins that were previously committed. Now, we talked about that, and we're going to continue on through 26 through the end of the chapter, which is verse 25, because in his forbearance God had passed over the sins that were previously committed. Verse 26, to demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, that he might be the just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Verse 27, where is boasting then? It is excluded by what law? Of works? No, but the law of faith. Therefore, we conclude that man is justified by faith apart from the deeds of the law. Or is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also the God of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also, since there is one God who will justify the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith. Did we then make void the law through faith? Certainly not. On the contrary, we established the law. All right, let's end there. We're going to go through the end of this chapter. Hopefully you noticed that there were 3 different questions that were asked there. We're going to talk about those. But just to kind of give us a summary of Romans chapter 3, 21 through 25 is that the standard of righteousness that God provides for us has always been the same. It is nothing but perfection. That is the standard of righteousness. Of course, we are not able to reach or maintain that status. So the only way that we're going to be able to, pull this off is if, that status has been gifted to us or given to us or imparted to us. And that, of course, is done through Jesus Christ. Faith in Jesus Christ and the fact that he took our punishment and that he rose again to give us the ability to come before God again satisfies the court's requirements. We're talking about a courtroom, how we're being indicted for being sinners. We're guilty. But it satisfies the court's requirements for justice. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But right now, verse 26. All right? Verse 26, to demonstrate at the present time. We talked about all this other stuff, all of sin and fall short of the glory of God, but we're being justified freely through his grace. We need to have that grace. We need to be justified. And the only way we can get that is by giving it being given to us. Verse 26, to demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, that he might be the just and the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Now, this verse is very pivotal because we need to go over a few words and a few concepts here, because those concepts and those words, those literal Greek words, carry forward through the rest of the end of this chapter and even a little bit beyond that into chapter 4, but we won't get to that point yet. So, the wrath of God calls for justice, calls for us to pay the penalty for sin, okay? And remember, we're talking about sin. Not talking about sins, okay? We're talking about sin, all right? So sin has infected us. I've used the example of you've got, regular water, you put dye in it, boom, it changes it. It never can go back to the way it is unless it's purified, unless somebody purifies it and takes that out. And that's the concept that we're talking about here. God calls for a just penalty for sin. And we just found out in verse 23, the wages of sin is death. So, that's kind of a bummer for us. So, the wrath of God still needs to be satisfied. Justice needs to be served. And the atoning death of Jesus is kind of our way to get out of that. And that's awesome. If you're looking at verse 26, there's two words that I really want to focus on. Well, it's kind of three words, but two words right now that I really want to focus on. And that is, God is just, it says. It says right here, he did all this stuff to demonstrate at the present time his righteousness, okay? And I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but I want you to kind of take note of it when we're reading it, how it almost seems like a contradiction. It seems like a paradox almost, but it's not. But we're going to talk about that. I don't want to get too far into it. I get excited about it. The present time, his righteousness, he's demonstrating at this present time his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of the ones who have faith. Just and justifier are the two words we're going to talk about. And they're very closely related. They're two different words. They kind of are derived a little bit from the same concept. But they're two very different words. And it's important to know what these words are because these words come up again. And it'll show you the common thread on how we're achieving justice and yet not being utterly, destroyed because of it. So, just. God is just because sin does not go unpunished. Sin is still fulfilled. The punishment for sin is still fulfilled. The wages of sin is death. The only way that we're going to be able to survive this is if that death is imparted to, that death is taken from us or taken for us, even better. The word just, dikaios, which is, in a wide sense, that word just is righteous. Okay? In a wide sense. In a broad sense, it's kind of like righteous. But the word itself means to observe divine law or to keep the commands of God. If you're just, this word just literally means that you are observing the law. You are observing what needs to be done. You are keeping the commands of God, who God is the lawmaker. He's the one that wrote the law. He's the one that wrote the rules. And he is following the commands of that. It comes from, that word just actually comes from the word decay, which means vengeance or judgment. Okay? So this word just means that it's derived from vengeance or justice. So the justice or the judgment or the vengeance or the punishment or the observance of the necessity for following through with the letter of the law is fulfilled. God did all this stuff that we read before in our previous one. For all of sin to fall short of the glory of God. That's the rule. Can't get around that. It has to be fulfilled. Okay, how does it be fulfilled? Well, we're being justified freely by the grace through the redemption of Jesus Christ. Okay, and he did all that stuff that if we have faith in him, he demonstrates his righteousness, as it says in verse 6, he demonstrates his righteousness at this present time, that he might be just, that he's following the law, that he's doing what needs to be done. Okay? And yet, even though he is just, for the wages of sin is death, he fulfills that, he still follows the law, or the letter of the law, or the rules, or the commands. He's still doing what needs to be done. And yet, he is the justifier also. Now, the word justifier, dikoio, which means a declaration or a pronouncement of righteousness or innocence. In a simple term, it's made free, I guess you could say, in a very simple kind of a sense right there. But it's a declaration or a pronouncement of righteousness or innocence. So he is just, meaning he is still fulfilling the rules. He's still fulfilling the law. And we're not talking about the law of Moses. We're talking about the law of God. The necessity for all of sin and fall short of the glory of God. Something has to be done. His righteousness, his justice needs to be given. So he is just in fulfilling that, still following the rules, still following the letter of the law. Okay? And yet he is also the justifier. The one that even though we have sin, not sins, we have sin which separates us from God, which means that because we have sin, death is in our future. He is just in the fact that he's following through with the rules, and yet he is also the justifier, declaring us free. Now, hopefully, not hopefully, but to me, that sounds like a paradox. That sounds like some kind of weirdness going on right there. How can he still do everything he needs to do? How can he still fulfill the requirements of the rules that he laid forth, and yet still make me free? And still, I'm guilty. There's no way around it. I'm guilty. I got sin. Sin requires death. It requires my destruction. And yet, he fulfills that, and yet still sets me free. Doesn't seem like it's cool. Like the two concepts don't kind of mesh together type of a thing. I wrote down these concepts that I had read in a commentary. It's he's just in punishing, and he's merciful in pardoning. All right? And the two don't seem to go together, and yet God makes it harmonize. He makes it all fit together. He is not only he is not only being just in fulfilling the requirements of the rules, and yet he is still justifying us or setting us free or pronouncing us innocent or righteous in those two things. Man, how can he do that? Well, it's an easy answer. Jesus. He did that through Jesus. And that is amazing. Okay? Now, there's one catch to this. Okay? We're guilty. No way around it. He's been telling us this for 3 chapters, how we just can't get away from the concept. We're guilty. And for the wages of sin is death. God can he can be just and fulfill that requirement and still pronounce us innocent. But the only way that's going to happen is if there's one thing done first, and that is faith. We have to accept it. You know what I mean? We have to be able to say, okay, I'll take that. You know what I mean? The only way that he can be the justifier, because he's going to be just, okay? No matter what, he's going to be just. He's going to fulfill the rules. And the rules are, we're in trouble. Okay? That's the way it boils down to. He's going to be just. But he can also be the justifier. And that word justifier, the actual Greek word there, comes up lots of times in the future, and we'll see it. He can still pronounce us righteous. He can still pronounce us innocent. He can still make us free. But we have to accept it. Once we accept that gift, once we accept that pronouncement upon us, well then he becomes not only just, but the justifier. Okay?
That's neat.
That's amazing. This little statement right here is so powerful, because it declares that he can be, and look, the key word that kind of crux around the whole thing is that he might be just and the justifier. He might be if you have faith. He might be the way out for you if you have faith. Because it continues on to say, the justifier of the one who has faith in Jesus. Okay? That's amazing. Now, all this stuff, all that Jesus is doing has nothing to do with me. The only part that I have in this whole thing is to go, okay, I'll take it. All right? I'm not doing anything. I'm not special. I'm not cool. He's not going to look at me and go, oh, well, we'll give blind eye. We'll turn a blind eye. No. He's going to be just. And yet, he can still be the justifier if I have that faith. Only if there is an acceptance on my part through faith. That gift has a wonderful, wonderful name. That gift that he gives us as the compassionate judge of the world has a magnificent grace, a magnificent name, and it is called grace. And that is what we live our lives on, is that wonderful grace. I love to be able to think about the concept that I live and I love through his grace. Okay? It's an unmerited favor. It's a mercy that is imparted to me that I can never, ever deserve. I can't earn it. I can't demand it. It can only be offered to me. All right? And I can't reciprocate it. All right? I can only just receive it. You know? It's just something that he's doing. It's a bold declaration of truth by Paul here, and he is making sure that we understand that this is all God. Our part is faith. And he asks 3 questions to. He kind of once he makes this so bold and wonderful proclamation that he is just and the justifier. Paul kind of does this throughout his writing. Sometimes he plays devil's advocate and he thinks to himself, "Okay, now I'm making this bold statement." And it almost sounds like a paradox. It almost sounds like it's at odds end, but it's not. God harmonizes it together, and it still can be the righteous, the righteous and just for mankind, and it also can be the justifier for us. And even though it sounds like they aren't together, they actually are. So he plays devil advocate, and he asks 3 questions that people might ask to say, "Well, you're saying he's just and the justifier. Well, what about, you know?" And he asks these 3 questions, and then, of course, he answers them, because that's the way he rolls. So he asks these 3 questions. In 27, he asks, "Where's the boasting?" And 29, he says, "Is God the God of the Jews only?" In verse 31, he says, "Do we nullify the law through faith?" So let's look at each one of those. Now let's get to 27 and 28 here, because these kind of blend together. Excuse me. Ooh, man. 27, 28. Oh, before I go on, does that make sense? I'm sorry. I'm just kind of rambling on here. I mean, does that sound good? Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about that? That verse to me is such a powerful statement about the magnitude, the power, the sovereignty, the overall just awesomeness of God. Mm-hmm. He sets down the law, he sets down the rules, and when you think you got him cornered, he can pull off a miracle. You know what I mean? And to me, through this verse, every time I see or experience or I hear somebody accept Christ as a personal Savior, that is a miracle. People want to see miracles every single day. That's a miracle. Because God's just and he will be just no matter what. That means you're done. And yet he can still be the justifier, and it's all up to you. All you got to do is just take in that faith. If you take in that faith, it's a miracle. You know what I mean? It is a true miracle. You know? So that's just me. I get all jazzed about stuff like this. What do you guys think? Any thoughts, comments? No? Yeah? No?
He is just in what was that little thing that you just said? He is just.
And the justifier?
No, in your book. He is just.
I write notes in my book. I don't know.
The commentary thing that you said you wrote down. He is just in something.
Oh, I read that somewhere. Just in punishing or merciful in pardoning. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Oh. No, you can't look at the little notes that I wrote. because I don't know if I spelled some of this stuff right. Because I write stuff down. 27, 28. Where is the boasting? This is the first question he asks. Where is the boasting then? Okay, that's the first question that pops out of his head. This whole thing is about God. This whole thing is about what he is doing and what he can do. What he has to do and what he can do. All right? This is all about God. The only part that we have in is faith. So then it says, where's the boasting? It is excluded. By what law? Law of works? No. But by the law of faith. Therefore, we conclude that man is justified, same word, man is justified, declared, pronounced just, or pronounced, innocent. Okay, same word, exact same word in the Greek. And conclude that man is justified by faith apart from the deeds of the law. Okay, so verse 27, he kind of asks the question. And then the end of 27, 28, he answers it. Okay? Where's the boasting? Okay? Will heaven be filled with people that are singing their own praises? Oh, well, I'm here because I'm so cool and I just thought God was there. No. It really didn't have anything to do with you. Okay? It's had to do with God loving mankind. Mankind is God's greatest creation. He cares about you. He loves you so much that he provided this. He literally moved heaven and earth to make this real for you through faith. No way you could be boasting about this. I mean, there are a bunch of people singing praises in heaven over their own wonderful choices. No. It's not that. Grace cancels out all that stupidity. Grace cancels out everybody's right to boast. That grace that has been imparted to us is something magnificent. And the truth of the gospel, and this is a little preview into this coming Sunday. The truth of the gospel, is offensive to us. It's offensive to our pride. Okay? The truth of the gospel is offensive to our pride. Why? I'm a guy and I'd like to think anyway that I'm self-sufficient, that I can do the things that I need to do. Anything that I need to have or to do. I mean, sure, there's lots of things I'd like to have, but anything I really need, I can do on my own. I am self-sufficient, all right? And that's just stupid pride because I can't do everything that there are some things that I think I can do. As a matter of fact, there are things that I think I can do that I probably could have done about 20 years ago, but I'm not going to be able to do it now. I just had soccer practice tonight, and I can tell you right now, I didn't even do anything. I was just running up and down the side of the field, and I'm already not being able to do what I used to be able to do. But Paul's saying here, you need to get over that. You need to get over yourself. Pride tells us that we can do what we need to do on our own, and he's saying that's the first thing that he says to us. The number one first sin that ever was committed, pride. And he's sitting here telling you right here, where's your boasting? Is it about the laws, about the things that you've been doing? No, it's not. Okay? It has to do with one thing and one thing only. Faith. Okay? Up to this point, Paul has done nothing but point out how insufficient we are in being able to provide for our own self. And if you haven't picked that up by now, man alive, you have not been reading the same book I've been reading, because that's all he's been saying to us. And for us to boast about it or try and have pride over that is just silly.
But throughout his journey, his missionary journeys, didn't he have all these boasters that every time he'd go into a town?
Oh, there's
the ones
plenty
that,
of people.
the ones that would the religious zealots, the keepers of the law,
Oh yeah.
would come in behind him or come in while he was there and start stirring up the people.
Yeah. Sadly, he used to be one.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Right. So he can speak firsthand
Oh yeah. That's the wonder. That's the best part about this. That's the wonderment of how God works. He chose Paul because Paul was uniquely able and gifted to be able to do that. He had one parent that was Roman, which gave him Roman citizenship, which gave him the ability to access things that Israelite people, or Jewish people couldn't. And he also had a Jewish background, and was raised under one of the most predominant Jewish teachers. And so he was so uniquely gifted to be able to do this. He was one of the chief prosecutors or persecutors, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, he was there when Stephen got stoned. You know what I mean? He was yanking people out of their homes, things like that. So for God to choose him made him so uniquely gifted because he had one foot in one side, one foot in the other side, could bridge them all together, and still lay it out because he has the experience, man. He's that guy. You know, it's amazing. But yeah, everywhere he went, man. I mean, through his journeys, he went. I mean, he was coming down through. You're looking at the map in my head. He was coming down through, and he went to like Corinth and Thessalonica and all those guys, and those guys were crazy, and they wanted to kill him because they didn't like what he was talking about, stuff like that. And then he goes to the next town, Berea, and everybody there was hinged on his word, but they didn't just get hinged on his word. They were so enthralled by what his message was that they sat there and they looked into Scripture every single day just to make sure that what he was saying was true. And, I mean, so yeah, he hit people all over the place. Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I get all excited. Yeah, where's the boasting? No boasting. That's done. Okay? So, he is the justifier by faith. That word justifier, same Greek word as, or justified, it says right there in 28. Conclude that this man is justified by faith. That word justified is the same word as justifier, okay, and that we looked at before. The pronouncement of innocence. So he is still the pronouncer of innocence by faith, apart from the works of the law. Okay? That word apart is, sometimes there are words, my brain works this way. I hope your brain works this way. If it doesn't, that's cool. When I read a word, there are some words that jump out at my face. There, in verse 24, therefore we conclude that a man is justified, once again, using that concept of justified being pronounced innocent, by faith. Okay? So faith is the thing that causes us that. By faith, we are now pronounced innocent, apart from the deeds of the law. That word apart should jump out at you. Chores, without any, or by itself. It's the concept that whatever it is attached to stands alone. Okay? That word apart means that whatever it's attached to stands alone. So in other words, a person is justified, pronounced innocent by faith, apart, or it stands solitary alone by itself, away from everything else that you could think of. There's all this stuff that you could be thinking of. There's all the works of the law. There's all the things that you could do. There's all the niceness in the world you could do. That's all over here. And way over here, apart from all that garbage, is that justified by faith. It's all over here. That word means that it is by itself. It is without anything else. That word is kind of an important word. It's kind of a pivotal word because it shows the separation of the two. And to us, it's kind of just an English word, but in Greek it matters. It shows that there's this huge separation. There's this, chasm in between. The two aren't even close to each other. They're apart. Okay? Does that make sense?
Which two words?
What's that?
Which two words are
Apart? I'm sorry, what?
You said the two words are apart from each other. Which words?
Oh, justified by faith, that concept, and the works of the law are separated. That's the thing. So that's kind of where he's going for. His first question is, Where's the boasting? Who's boasting? It tells us at the very end. The works of the law, the people that do the works of the law. Those people are boasting. Those people are thinking, well, the stuff I'm doing is getting me where I need to go. No, it's not. No, it's not. The only way you're getting where you need to go is if the just makes you justified, God justifies you by your faith. That stands alone over here, apart from the option to boast.
So many people miss that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, think that all this good stuff and they're going to...
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the thing. Once again, you know, we talk about that all the time. Where's the divining rod? You know, people do that. Sadly, people do that all the time. You know, where's the divining rod? I think of, well, I'm better than this guy. You know what I mean? So that's where your divining rod is. That has nothing to do with it. Where's the boasting? There's no boasting. It's not about what you're doing. Okay? Because we just found out in the verse prior to that God's going to be just. And that's it. But he can also be the justifier. But the only way you're going to get it is if you receive that gift and you have faith. Grace can be imparted to you. Innocence can be pronounced upon you. And people still seem to think that, you know, well, I can still do it, or I can still earn it, or whatever. So that's why, and that's the pride. That's our pride right there. That's why that's the first question he asks, because that's where we typically go to. You know what I mean? That's usually where we typically go to, is, well, I'm better than this guy, or whatever. Get over yourself. You ain't making it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's faith that makes that happen. Okay. Any other thoughts? Sorry. Okay. 29:30. How we doing? We're good. Right on. 29:30. Or, this is the second question. Or, is he the God of Jews only? Is he not also the God of the Gentiles? And then, you know, these are kind of rhetorical questions, but he's answering them anyway. Yes, of the Gentiles also. Since there is one God who will justify, same word, the circumcised by faith and the uncircumcised through faith. Word justified, same word, same Greek word that we're seeing there. And that's why we got to recognize it. Same Greek word, boom, boom, boom. Excuse me. Paul's second question there is the notion that God is somehow partial. Okay? That somehow God is partial to some over others. Okay? If justification comes by the law, you know, the law of Moses, this time we're talking about the law of Moses, then he gave the law to an exclusive group of people. So if you're getting that pronouncement of righteousness through the law, and he gave the law to the Jewish people, then obviously the Jewish people are there. You know, as we saw in previous chapters, that he talked about, you know, chapter 1 he talked about mankind in general. Then in chapter 2 he starts to get a little bit more personal, starts saying you, not we. And then towards the end of that, in the beginning of chapter 3, he starts addressing the Jewish people. He starts addressing them because they have a tendency to kind of separate themselves, thinking that they're special because of the law of Moses. Now, don't get me wrong. The law is a representation, a small one, of course, but the law is a representation of the necessity and the character of God. So it's not bad, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it was never intended to justify anybody. It was never intended to make pronouncement of innocence to anybody. As a matter of fact, it was there to do the exact opposite. It was to pronounce guilt, not pronounce innocence. That was its purpose. So here, he's making it very clear, all right? Making it very clear that obedience to the law isn't the case. Obedience, where's your boasting? There's no boasting. You're not doing anything special. Is it just because you're a Jew, does that make you special because he gave you the law and you have the ability to do more stuff because maybe you know more stuff? No, it's still not going to cut it, is basically what he's saying here. The common denominator that he gives here, well, he talks about, very specifically, since there is one God, powerful statement. Okay? Powerful statement. Because he needed to remind them, there's one God. You're talking about two separate sets of rules here is what you're trying to come up with. You're trying to come up with rules for you and rules for everybody else. There's rules for what you need to do and rules for what those people need to do. Well, I need to be circumcised. You aren't circumcised because you're not cool like me. No. He's not. There's only one God. Okay? The rules don't change. And they've never changed. And once again, I don't want to get too far ahead of things, but when we get into chapter 4, we're going to see how that plays out, and he kind of expounds on that a little bit more. But I don't want to get too ahead of that. He's talking about a common denominator here. He wants to make sure that he answers this question very simply and very directly. Okay? He says, there's only one God who will justify, once again, that word justify, same word, pronouncement of innocence. Okay, there's only one God that's going to pronounce innocence on people, and it's done by faith, whether you're circumcised, whether you're not circumcised. The common denominator is faith. All right? So he answers that second question. The first question is, where's your boasting? Nah, there's no boasting. You're not doing anything special. Well, is he just partial? Is he just partial to one group over another group? No, because I just got done telling you you're not doing anything special. You know what I mean? Just because you got the law doesn't mean that you're extra cool. Okay? That was not meant to pronounce innocence. It was there to pronounce sin, your guilt. Okay? And a lot of people miss that piece too. You know, especially back then. They're thinking about, the law, it's there to pronounce it, innocent. No. It's there to pronounce your guilt. It's to showcase sin and how infested you are in it, so that you'll understand the just that needs to be done, that God needs to be just, the wages of sin is death, but he can also be the justifier, and he does that through faith. And that's the common denominator right there. Okay, second question. Any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. Does this make any sense? Am I going too fast?
Mm-mm.
No? We're good?
Perfect.
Okay.
It was just some awesome stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And it's obvious that these writings are from God, because if Paul had tried to do them, there would be some flaws in it. In and of himself.
Oh, yeah.
So, no matter how good we are at something, there's still going to be flaws
Oh, yeah.
there. So, God, nowhere can you poke a hole in this.
Right. And that's the important part of, this is just me on a personal note. That's the important part of the written word versus the spoken word. Like, sometimes I can say things and I'll say dumb things, or maybe I'll misspeak about something. But here, he wrote it down, and the composition of the words and the way that he puts them together showcases the importance of what it is, which is way cool. So yes, absolutely, I love that. Icky. Last question, verse 31. Okay? Do we then make void the law through faith? Okay, so, once again, is God partial to just the Jewish people because they got the law? No, he's not. Faith is what's going to save the circumcised or the uncircumcised, no matter what. So then, of course, the natural question that comes next is, do we then, is the law made void through faith? Well, certainly not. On the contrary, we established the law. And I kind of already told a little bit about this. I kind of couldn't help myself. But was the law given to Israel? Does that make it irrelevant? Well, no. Paul uses this Greek term there for void. That word void is another word that kind of jumps out and is very important to you. Kategorio, or katergeo. I don't know what I was saying there for a second. Katergeo, which is void, which means to nullify or to render useless or reduce to nothing. Okay, so do we then make the law nothing, or do we reduce it to nothing, or do we nullify it because of faith? Is what he's saying here. this has kind of two. This kind of has two little implications to it, I guess you could say, and that's the law of faith is a new principle. Okay, think about it. You're saying, okay, so since we answered the second question, the second question, is he partial? No, he's not partial. Faith is going to save all of them. Okay, so then do we take the law and just nullify it or make it nothing because of this faith concept? And the first implication is that faith is like a new concept. You know, like having faith in God is something new. You know, and that's not the case at all. Faith in God, there's only two things since the dawn of time that God's ever asked people to do, and that's to have faith and to be obedient. Those are the two things he's asked of them since the dawn of time. Okay? Faith and obedience is the only two things. Okay? And we can pull either one of them off. But now, faith has been a common thread through everything, and we're going to see that again, like I said, in chapter 4, we're going to see that. He's going to give an example of Abraham and all this kind of stuff. We don't want to get to that too quick. But anyway, the first implication is that he's saying that that this whole concept of faith, the law of faith, is kind of a new factor because of Christ. So since Christ came and died, now all of a sudden this faith thing is there, which isn't necessarily a new concept. The second implication is that the Old Testament, like the law of Moses, all these truths that are given to us in the law of Moses now aren't real anymore, or now aren't truthful anymore, or now nothing. Once again, that word void, reduced to nothing. Okay? So the first implication is that this concept of faith, because of Christ, is now this new concept. And the second implication is that because of this concept of faith, because of what Christ did, now the law is, reduced to nothing. It's nothing. It's garbage now. Okay? Not the case at all. Okay? Because if you're familiar at all with the rules and the logic of these two statements, they don't make sense with each other. If you look at it, when saying faith is a new concept, and because of this faith, it's a brand new concept. So now, does this faith concept reduce everything else before it to nothing? And it has a logical stream through it, but the two statements don't actually agree with each other. In that, it's making an assumption that God has changed. Okay? Is that God's changed his plan, God's changed his mind, God's changed everything. And that ain't the case. Because both of these things have the same concept. Well, now because of Christ, everything's changed. No. Things haven't changed. Which inspired, once again, my sermon that we're going to have on Sunday in Genesis. About how, back in Genesis 3, God said he was going to do this. He said he was going to provide. He said he was going to have to do what he was going to have to do, and yet he still harmonized the concept between the just and the justifier right here. And these people are trying to make the concept up that, well, this is all new rules. This is, God changed everything. So because he changed everything, does that mean everything that he did before, we just toss it out the window and throw it out because it's not worth anything or anything like that? That is not what he's saying here. The law of faith isn't an old-timey thing. The code of conduct that was given to the Israelites through Moses was an expression of God's grace. That was kind of the concept or the cornerstone of how the Jewish people kind of fell out of the good graces, I guess you could say, of God so often, is they got so caught up with doing and not the why they're doing. You know what I mean? They got so caught up in the rhetoric of doing all these things that they didn't understand the purpose of God's grace that he was giving it to them. This concept of grace is not something new. This concept of faith is not something new. And all this stuff before is not worthless, because every single thing that the law provided for them to embrace the concept that God was there for them, and God was trying to provide for them. God was imparting his grace to them, and they, in turn, needed to take that grace and impart it out to others. That was their sole job. God took a rule book and said, okay, This is about me. This is about my character. This is about, you want to know what my will and purpose is for you? Here's a little tidbit of it. Take this rule book, follow it, and help other people follow it so they'll understand the wonderful grace that I have through faith. Okay? That was before Jesus Christ. Okay? After Jesus Christ, the same concept's there. Through faith and God's grace, I need you to just believe in these things and keep this stuff going and go tell other people. Except this time, now, because of Jesus Christ, it makes things a little bit easier. But the concept of faith and grace are not new, and they're given through the law just as much as they were now through Christ Jesus, through the gospel. The law reflects the character of God, and we can't say the law is bad, because it isn't. But it contributes, the law contributes to our ruin, because it is not there to pronounce our innocence, like I said before, it's there to pronounce our guilt. Okay? So if we can do the law and understand our guilt, that makes the faith and grace that God has imparted to us through Jesus Christ even more powerful, even more wonderful. It's not something to get all proud about and get mad about. Well, now God changed out all the rules and everything. No. Get over yourself, okay? Get over yourself. This ain't about you. This is about everything God's doing for you. And he wrapped it up into a neat little bow and told you all you need is faith in that. Just like he's told you since the dawn of time. Just faith and obedience. Faith and obedience. Here's his grace. Love it, like it, live it. All right? So, disobedience in this and this prideful kind of position is basically the proof of our guilt and the proof of the necessity of God's provision of Christ. I hope you understand that concept. The pride that we feel, going back, once again, I've been doing this study in Genesis now. Going back to Genesis, when man sinned, what was the first thing they do? They hid. Oh, I did something wrong. I hid. You know what I mean? Right now, as we live and breathe today, if somebody confronts you with something that you did that might be bad, what's the first thing you do? Well, you try and deflect, you try and change the subject, you try and, you know what I mean? You get all defensive about it, okay? And that means that there's something wrong. And somewhere in that, you need some grace, okay? Well, this is no different, okay? God's law is that same thing. It's slapping you in the face with your own sin. The sin that indwells you. And you can get all defensive and you can get all mad as much as you want. But it showcases the need for God's grace. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? I mean, does anybody have any thoughts or comments or anything about that or all that kind of stuff? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not losing anybody. Mm-mm. Awesome. Well, good. Well, we kind of out of time now.
Just amazing how much is packed into two little paragraphs.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. It is. It's amazing how, and just like Karen said, how choice the words are made, and how composing them together in the way that they are showcases the magnificence of who and what God is about. It is. It's awesome. It's awesome. Okay? Is that alright, Mom? Okay, good. Alright. Mom's seal of approval. Mom's seal of approval. I like that. Well, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll finish up here, and then we'll start up in chapter 4 next time. Are we going too slow? I apologize if we're going too slow.
Perfect.
No.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. I just want to make sure, because I get all excited and I dissect things and stuff, and my brain works weird. So Anyway, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for having these wonderful pieces of scripture in here and how magnificent they are. Just in a sentence, just in a single statement that we make, we learn that you are the just God, ruler of everything, creator of the universe. You are just in everything that you do, and yet can be the justifier of a person like me, someone who has obviously failed, somebody who's obviously guilty, somebody obviously has got sin that separates us, and yet you can be the justifier. You can still pronounce innocence upon me and still fulfill your own law, your own rules, and how that is not something that I did, that's not something I can boast about. You made it all through the provision of your Son and through faith that I have in Him. Dear Lord, thank you. I can't begin to thank you enough. Just the thought and the concept of your grace and your gospel and all that you've done, all you've provided, should do nothing short of just stir me to the very core and give me joy and peace. And that's what you tell us that this will do, is actually give us joy and peace. And sometimes we get all caught up in the things that we're doing and in our own lives and things like that. Help us to remember that not only are you just, but you're the justifier. You actually have made it so that we can be together forever. Thank you. Thank you abundantly. It's not something I could earn. It's not something I can, pay you back for. But I'm eternally grateful. And dear Lord, help these verses just touch each one of us and help us to carry it with us throughout the week and help it to really affect the way that we live and the way that we interact with other people and the way that we just share our lives with those around us. Bless us, dear Lord. Give us the strength and the courage to be able to do those things. Thank you so much for us being here and this time that we've had here. And I hope it is a sweet smelling aroma for you, that it just was a time of honor and praise to you. Thank you. And we ask it in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
It
Okay.
was honoring.